Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be looking at that feeling you get, when you're scrolling through social media and it seems like everyone else is living just like a picture-perfect life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like that disconnect between like the curated online world and, our own often less glamorous reality.
Exactly. So our source material for this deep dive is this YouTube video that breaks down some of these like common social media tropes and things. And to kick things off, let's talk about Instagram.
Ooh, yeah.
Specifically those like golden hour photos
Mm-hmm.
where like everyone just looks effortlessly stunning.
Right.
I have to admit, sometimes I wonder if these people like even exist in the real world.
Right. It's so funny you say that because the video points out that it's not even just about like the aesthetics. It's about this thing called social comparison theory.
Right.
And essentially like we're just wired to compare ourselves to others.
Right.
And Instagram is like this hyper-visual battleground for that comparison.
So it's not just about like taking a pretty picture. It's about projecting this image
Yeah.
of, success or happiness or whatever that even means in the context of Instagram.
Exactly. And the problem is this constant comparison, it can really mess with our self-esteem.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, when we're comparing our everyday lives to these carefully curated highlight reels.
That makes a lot of sense. And you know what I've definitely noticed? Those golden hour photos like everywhere on my feed lately.
Oh, for sure.
It's like everyone suddenly became like a professional photographer with just like impeccable timing and lighting.
Right. It's like we all have the same lighting guy following us around. Like,
Right.
how is that possible?
Yeah. Do you think there's any way to like break free from that comparison trap?
Absolutely. There's totally ways. And one of the biggest things you can do is just be mindful of the accounts you follow.
Okay.
So you want to think, are you following people who genuinely like inspire you? Or are you following accounts that make you feel inadequate or envious? And if it's the latter, maybe it's time to just hit that unfollow button and curate a feed that actually makes you feel good.
That's such a good idea. It's like you're taking control over your own digital environment instead of letting the algorithm just like dictate what you see.
Right. And, since we're talking about like breaking free from these like social media tropes, can we talk about the just woke up selfie trend?
You mean those pictures where everyone just like magically wakes up looking like they just stepped out of a salon?
Uh-huh.
I gotta be honest, those photos make me feel a little bad about my own bedhead and morning breath.
It's so funny because we know it's not real, right? Like we know people don't actually wake up looking flawless.
Right.
But we still kind of like buy into this idea because it's just become so normalized on social media.
And it's not just that it's not real.
Yeah.
It's that it sets up these like unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to wake up looking perfect, and if we don't, we're like somehow failing.
Right. It's exhausting.
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. And it just highlights, I think, this bigger issue of how social media can just warp our perceptions of reality.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like we're all collectively pretending to be part of this like flawless species thriving on 8 hours of sleep and green smoothies.
Which brings us to another point the video raises, and this is Facebook friendships.
Okay.
How many of those Facebook friends do you actually interact with regularly?
Hmm.
And are those connections truly meaningful?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I know for me, I have like hundreds of Facebook friends, but I only really talk to a handful of them on a regular basis.
Right. It's almost like we're collecting these like digital connections
Yeah.
without really fostering the kind of like deep, meaningful relationships that are actually important for like, our well-being.
So if we're not really connecting with like most of these people,
Yeah.
why are we so obsessed with amassing all these connections?
Yeah.
Like what is driving that?
Well, the video touches on like a few factors like validation seeking
Right.
and like FOMO, that fear of missing out.
Yeah.
But I think there's something deeper at play here too. It's like this fundamental human need to belong and have connection.
So it's not about being fake necessarily.
Yeah.
It's more about like wanting to be part of something, wanting to feel seen and accepted.
Right.
It's just that sometimes that desire gets expressed in these like kind of superficial ways online.
Right. And that's where things can get a little tricky because the more we focus on curating this perfect online persona, the further we might drift from our authentic selves.
So how do we strike that balance? Like, how do we engage with social media without getting sucked into this vortex of comparison and perfectionism?
That's the million-dollar question.
Oh.
And that's exactly what we're going to delve into in our next segment.
Ooh, I can't wait.
But for now, I'm curious what resonates with you most so far.
Yeah.
What thoughts or feelings are coming up for you as we unpack all these social media tropes?
It's fascinating how those like seemingly harmless social media tropes we were just talking about can actually reveal a lot about like our deeper motivations and anxieties. You're so right. And I think that's what makes this whole topic so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just about pretty pictures and witty captions.
Right.
It's about understanding like the psychology behind our online behavior.
Exactly. And one theory that I think sheds some light on all this is this thing called self-presentation theory.
Okay.
It basically suggests that we're constantly like trying to manage the impressions that other people have of us. And social media becomes like this platform where we can carefully craft our own public image.
So instead of just being ourselves online, we're essentially performing a version of ourselves that we think will be like the most appealing to our audience.
Yeah, you could say that. And just like actors, we choose our costumes, our props, our scripts carefully.
Right.
We filter our photos, we write those witty captions, and we highlight the aspects of our lives that we think will get us the most likes and positive feedback.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And speaking of likes and positive feedback, I've noticed that sometimes, even when I know a post is like super curated or even a little bit fake, I still find myself hitting that like button. It's like, I can't help but get sucked into that game of like social validation.
Oh, absolutely. That's the power of those algorithms at work. They're designed to tap into our reward systems, and those likes and comments, they trigger the release of dopamine, which makes us feel good. Well, so we're constantly chasing that next hit of validation, even if it means presenting a slightly distorted version of ourselves online.
It's like this vicious cycle. We crave that validation.
Oh, yes.
So we curate our online presence to get more likes, which then reinforces our need for validation.
Yeah, exactly.
And so on and so on.
Precisely. And it's this cycle that can be so hard to break free from, because the more we invest in this curated online persona, the more pressure we might feel to keep up those appearances.
So if we're constantly chasing likes and presenting this like idealized version of ourselves, what happens to our authentic selves?
Yeah.
Like, do they just get lost in the shuffle?
That's a really important question, and I think it's one that we all need to grapple with. Because if we're not careful, we can start to lose touch with who we really are.
And I imagine that can have like some pretty negative consequences for our mental health and well-being.
Absolutely. Because when we're constantly comparing ourselves to these curated online versions of other people, it can be really hard to feel good about our own like messy, imperfect realities.
So if we're aware of these pitfalls, if we understand like how these algorithms are working and how they're impacting our behavior,
Yeah,
can we actually use social media in a more positive and authentic way?
I think we can, but it requires being really intentional about our social media use.
Okay.
It's about asking ourselves, like, why are we using these platforms?
Yeah.
What are we hoping to get out of them? And are they truly serving our needs?
So it's not about giving up social media entirely. It's about being more mindful of how we're using it.
Exactly. And it's about being aware of those moments when we're feeling triggered by comparison or when we're feeling pressured to present a certain image online.
You know, speaking of triggers, I've noticed that my social media feed seems to be filled with ads that are like eerily relevant to my recent browsing history. It's like those algorithms know exactly what I'm thinking about buying.
That's the magic of targeted advertising. Those algorithms are incredibly sophisticated, and they use our data to personalize the content we see, including those ads.
It's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like they're reading our minds.
it can be. But the good news is you can actually adjust your ad preferences on most platforms.
Okay.
And you can limit the amount of data that's used to target you.
Okay.
So it's about taking back some control over your online experience.
That's reassuring to know.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how these algorithms can be manipulative
Yeah,
and how they can feed into our insecurities.
right.
But do you think there's also a way to use them to our advantage?
Definitely. I think it's all about understanding how they work and then being strategic about the content you engage with. If you constantly click on, like, or share posts that make you feel bad, the algorithm is going to assume you want more of that content.
So I'm essentially training the algorithm to show me more of what I don't want to see.
Exactly. But the reverse is also true. If you start actively engaging with content that makes you feel good,
Yeah.
that aligns with your values and interests, the algorithm will eventually catch on and start showing you more of that.
So instead of being at the mercy of the algorithm, I can actually shape it to reflect my own preferences and priorities.
You absolutely can. And it's not just about the content you engage with, it's also about the accounts you follow and the communities you join.
This is really empowering.
It is.
So we've talked about like the dark side of social media, but you're making me realize that there's also a lot of potential for good.
Yeah.
It's about being mindful. It's about taking control, and it's about using these platforms to actually connect with others in meaningful ways.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's about remembering that social media is just a tool, right? It's up to us to decide how we use it and whether we allow it to enrich our lives or undermine our well-being.
Such a powerful reminder. And with that in mind, I'm really curious to explore some practical strategies for navigating these algorithms and reclaiming control over our social media experiences.
Let's dive into that right after we take a quick moment to reflect on everything we've discussed so far.
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways that are resonating with you the most?
You know, it's funny, we've been talking about social media as this powerful force that can shape our thoughts and feelings and even our behaviors. It's almost like we're talking about some kind of sci-fi movie where robots are controlling our minds.
There is an element of science fiction to it, right? But instead of robots, it's these algorithms, these lines of code that are designed to keep us engaged and keep us scrolling and keep us coming back for more.
And like you said before, it's not necessarily malicious. These algorithms are just doing what they're programmed to do,
Right.
which is optimized for engagement. But the problem is that engagement often comes at the expense of our well-being.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about those choices. What are some concrete steps we can take to kind of reclaim control over our social media experiences and make sure that they're actually serving us instead of the other way around?
Well, one strategy that we touched on earlier is being mindful of the content you engage with. Every time you like a post, share an article, even just click on a link, you're sending a signal to the algorithm about what you're interested in.
So I want to see more positive, uplifting content. I need to start actively engaging with that kind of content.
Exactly. It's like training a puppy. You reward the behavior you want to see more of. So those inspiring posts, share those thought-provoking articles, comment on things that resonate with you. The algorithm will eventually catch on and start showing you more of what you're actually interested in.
And it's not just about the content we engage with, right? It's also about the accounts we follow.
Absolutely. Take some time to audit your following list. Are you following people who genuinely inspire you, who make you feel good, who share content that aligns with your values? Or are you following people out of obligation or because you feel like you should?
Oh, I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah.
There are certain accounts I follow because I feel like I'm supposed to, even though their content doesn't really resonate with me or honestly sometimes makes me feel kind of bad about myself.
Yeah, and that's where that unfollow button comes in handy. Remember, you're in control of your own digital space. You get to decide who you let into that space and what kind of energy you want to cultivate.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me from this deep dive. It's realizing that I have more agency than I thought.
Yeah.
It's not about giving up social media entirely. It's about using it in a way that supports my well-being.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that social media is just one part of your life. It's not the whole picture. So make sure you're also nurturing those real-life connections, those hobbies and interests that bring you joy and those activities that make you feel grounded and fulfilled.
That's such a great reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in the online world and forget that there's a whole world out there beyond the screen.
And that world is full of amazing people, incredible experiences, and endless possibilities for connection and joy. So don't let social media distract you from all the good stuff that's happening in your own life.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on social media, and I'm excited to put some of these strategies into practice.
Me too. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all navigating this complex digital landscape together. So be kind to yourself, be mindful of your choices, and remember to prioritize your own well-being.
Well said. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. And remember, the next time you find yourself scrolling through social media, take a moment to pause, reflect, and ask yourself, is this serving me? And if it's not, don't be afraid to make a change. Until next time, take care.